Zuma submitted his representations to the NPA last month in line with the court ruling which set aside a 2009 decision by former acting prosecutions boss Mokotedi Mshe to drop charges against him. Wits Associate Law Professor and practicing advocate Professor James Grant has observed this particular matter with keen interest, and he now joins us via Skype. Professor Grant, thank you so much for joining us. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has withdrawn the former president's appeal against the court ruling that Abrahams should vacate his position. Does this mean he has to quit? And if so, when?
No, it doesn't. Let me just say it makes sense that current President Cyril Ramaphosa withdrew the appeal based on the fact that the Pretoria High Court found that the then President Zuma, as Zuma in his personal capacity, was conflicted. It was something personal to him. And so, therefore, President Zuma could not appoint the new NDPP. In this problem that faces us now is whether the fact that the current president has withdrawn means that the NDPP has to stand down. The answer is absolutely not. His appeal remains in place, and the effect of that is that it suspends the order of the court of the High Court.
Now, Shaun Abrahams is still appealing the matter, which is to be heard next week. What do you think the appeal will produce?
It's incredibly difficult to say and to anticipate what the judges might find. What one needs to bear in mind is what was central to it all, which was that ultimately the court there found that the appointment had been improper by virtue of the fact that there had been improper pressure placed on the then NDPP. And the only answer that Shaun Abrahams will want to pursue, and indeed my understanding from media reports is that he is pursuing, is to make the argument that in fact the then NDPP had utterly independently and unilaterally decided to step down from his post. Now, that issue was canvassed at length by the Pretoria High Court, and they found that line of reasoning is utter nonsense. They rejected it, and we'll have to wait and see what the Constitutional Court says about that.
Professor Grant, what's the likelihood that charges against former President Jacob Zuma may be reinstated from the impending review by Shaun Abrahams?
It's interesting that people are speaking about the reinstitution. If one understands the effect of the Supreme Court of Appeal decision to overturn Mokotedi Mshe's decision to withdraw the charges have actually automatically been reinstated. Perhaps that's too much of a technicality. The real question will be, will the NPA pursue those charges? I believe that an independent NPA must, given the fact that there would appear to be a prima facie case, and it's a case which even the Supreme Court of Appeal has endorsed as a case which needs to be answered.
Could they produce a jail term?
Absolutely. The main charge involved here is one of corruption, and certainly where one commits corruption in common purpose with others, or alternatively multiple counts of corruption, you put yourself in line, in fact, peculiarly, because I expect many people wouldn't expect this, for a lifetime imprisonment sentence, which means in South Africa life, except that one is entitled to apply for parole of 25 years.
Now, Professor Grant, Shaun Abrahams says he is yet to decide if former President Jacob Zuma will be prosecuted for 783 counts of fraud, racketeering and money laundering. What is he going to look at, basically?
Well, I can answer what he should look at. The considerations that an NDPP or any prosecutor making this decision should look at are whether there is a prima facie case, whether there's a reasonable prospect of success, these sorts of questions. There are certain extreme circumstances where other considerations might play a role, such as in cases such as where a father has accidentally or negligently shot his own daughter. In cases like that, there is some leeway for some compassion to be shown. But other than that, in cases where there's, on the fact, a case to be answered, you're pretty much duty-bound as a prosecutor to go ahead and prosecute.
Did Shaun Abrahams, Prof, delay plans to prosecute former President Jacob Zuma?
That's an incredibly difficult question to answer. I suspect that, as many people suspect, and that's all I can offer, is that he did indeed. But whether I have any basis for this, I think you should possibly be asking someone of the order of Thuli Madonsela for the facts on that.
And just looking at a letter that was in a letter sent to President Zuma's attorneys last year, Shaun Abrahams said that the scope of representations was extremely limited because the courts have rejected those already submitted in 2009. What does this really imply?
It could imply a number of things. It could imply that he was doing his a proper job, and that it's to be taken on the face of it. It could also, if we're to read between the lines, imply that he saw that the winds of change were that things were changing, and that he needed to change his style and manner of dealing with this issue.
What's the legal time frame within which Shaun Abrahams should respond?
I think the best guess here is that it would have to be a reasonable one, and what that is in the circumstances, I expect, is that we should expect an answer within about a month. To my knowledge, there is no set time frame for a decision of this nature.
Now, Prof, just going back to the NPA is adamant that Abrahams was validly appointed. Does this argument hold water?
I think it's going to be very difficult to persuade the Constitutional Court that indeed he was validly appointed, by virtue of the fact that it all comes down to whether indeed the decision to step down of Nkosana was completely independent, and on the analysis conducted by the Pretoria High Court, it seems to be the case that the President had made several approaches to Nkosana and effectively told him that he had to pack his bag. So in those circumstances, I think it's going to be difficult, but we'll have to see.
If he is told to pack his bags, what happens thereafter? Is there a time frame that is given with regards to vacating the office, or is there, immediately pack your things, leave immediately, or is he given a day, a week? What happens in that situation?
It could be a very interesting one. I think in theory there could be one answer, which is, if the Concourt confirms the order of the High Court, it would mean, at least in theory, that the appointment was void and he never was appointed in the first place. However, of course, there are practical considerations, and some time would have to be given, of course, to the new president to make the new appointment, and, of course, to receive proper advice on that and apply his mind properly to the question. So inevitably there's going to be a delay. But no question, there would have to be a swift movement on this front, and I expect that we would have to see a new appointment within a week or two.
Professor Grant, thank you so much for joining us. We'll leave it there for now. As an insight from Wits Associate Law Professor and Practicing Advocate Professor James Grant via Skype.